Welcome back to Bluverdose 1. Red Heart. Tonight's story begins with a man who never expected his life to end while reading a novel. One moment, he was sitting at home, eating ramen and reading a story on his phone. The next moment, he opened his eyes in the world of that very novel. But he hadn't been reborn as the hero. He hadn't become the powerful protagonist. He had transmigrated into a tiny, newborn panda who was barely 2 months old. And the worst part? He knew exactly what was going to happen to the man standing at the end of the road. The villain. The man destined for a terrible ending. And now, this tiny panda was the only one who knew the truth. Part 1. The little panda who ran into the villain. The night in the Eastern Spirit Realm was unusually quiet. Moonlight slipped through the thick forest and painted the ancient trees silver. But the silence didn't last. Something small was running through the bushes. Very small. A tiny black and white panda stumbled between the roots of the trees, his short legs moving as fast as they could. He was barely 2 months old. His round ears were covered with leaves. His fluffy fur was dirty from the long journey, and his little paws were trembling from exhaustion. Behind him came the sound of hurried footsteps. Catch that spiritual beast. Don't let it escape. That little panda will fetch a good price if we sell it to the right noble family. The panda's ears immediately flattened. He didn't understand why these humans wanted him. He only knew one thing. He did not want to be sold. His tiny body squeezed through a gap between two rocks. I don't want to go with them. I'm hungry. I'm tired. Why is running so difficult when my legs are this short? He stopped for a moment and looked behind him. Nobody was there. The panda sighed in relief. Then his stomach growled. He looked around hopefully. Food first. He sniffed the air. Nothing. Fine. Escape first. Food later. He continued running. Unfortunately, he forgot one very important thing. He was looking behind him instead of ahead. His little paw stepped on a loose stone. Pip. He slipped. His body rolled down a small slope. He bounced once, twice, and finally, thump. He crashed directly into someone's leg. The panda froze. A pair of black boots stood in front of his face. Slowly, he raised his head. A tall man dressed in dark robes stood beneath the moonlight. His long black hair moved slightly in the night breeze. His face was cold and unreadable. His gray eyes lowered toward the tiny creature sitting at his feet. The panda's heart nearly stopped. Oh, no, 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 no. The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. The panda knew this face. Why did I have to run into him? He knew this person. He had seen him countless times while reading the novel in his previous life. Cang Yuchen, the feared duke of the Northern Realm. The man everyone called heartless. The man who would eventually become the greatest villain in the entire story. The panda stared at him in horror. I'm doomed. Cang Yuchen bent down. The panda immediately tried to crawl backward, but his tiny legs refused to cooperate. Cang Yuchen picked him up with one hand. The panda became completely still. His fluffy body fit easily into the man's palm. Cang Yuchen looked at him. The little panda looked back. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the panda's stomach growled loudly. Cang Yuchen blinked. The panda slowly lowered his head in embarrassment. Please don't kill me. I'm just a baby. I haven't even eaten dinner. Something strange happened. For the first time that night, Cang Yuchen's cold expression changed. Only slightly. His gaze moved from the panda's trembling ears to his empty stomach. Then he heard another thought. If I'm going to die anyway, I wish I could eat bamboo one last time. Cang Yuchen went completely still. He had heard it, not with his ears. The voice had appeared directly inside his mind. He stared at the panda. The panda was completely unaware. Cang Yuchen said nothing. Behind them, the distant footsteps grew louder. The men searching for the panda were getting closer. Cang Yuchen glanced toward the forest, then back at the tiny creature in his hand. You're being hunted? The panda's ears twitched. He didn't understand the question. Cang Yuchen sighed quietly. He removed his outer cloak and wrapped the tiny panda inside it. The panda blinked. Warm, soft, safe. His eyes slowly became heavy. This is surprisingly comfortable. Maybe the villain isn't going to kill me. A pause. Still, I should escape when I get the chance. Cang Yuchen looked down at the little panda. His gray eyes became strangely thoughtful. Interesting. Then he turned away from the approaching footsteps and walked toward his carriage. The tiny panda curled up inside his cloak. Within moments, he was asleep. and completely unaware that the man carrying him had just made a decision that would change the entire story. The villain of the novel had taken the little panda home. Part 2. The villain's residence. The carriage moved quietly through the night. Inside, Cang Yuchen sat against the side of the carriage, his expression as cold as ever. No one dared to speak, except for the tiny creature sleeping inside his cloak. The little panda was curled into the soft fabric, his round body rising and falling peacefully. Every few moments, one tiny paw would twitch. Cang Yuchen lowered his eyes. He had never kept an animal before. He had certainly never carried one home. Yet somehow, this little panda had managed to find its way into his carriage without asking permission. Cang Yuchen reached out and carefully adjusted the cloak around him. The panda immediately snuggled deeper into the warmth. Then came a faint thought. Warm. A pause. Soft. Another pause. Hungry. Cang Yuchen's fingers stopped. He stared at the panda. Again, that strange voice. He had heard it clearly when they first met. Yet the panda's mouth had never moved. Cang Yuchen said nothing. Perhaps he had imagined it. The carriage eventually stopped. We have arrived, my lord. Cang Yuchen stepped outside. His residence stood behind enormous stone gates. The servants waiting there immediately lowered their heads. My lord. Nobody dared look directly at him. Cang Yuchen walked inside. Then someone noticed the small bundle in his arms. The servant's eyes widened. Was that a panda? A living panda? And the Duke was carrying it himself? Nobody dared ask. Cang Yuchen noticed their expressions. Prepare food. The servants froze. For the panda? Cang Yuchen glanced at them. Do I look like I'm asking twice? No, my lord. The servant immediately hurried away. Inside the residence, the panda slowly opened his eyes. He looked around. A massive room. Beautiful furniture. Expensive decorations. Soft carpets. Everything looked completely different from the forest. The panda stared for several seconds. Then his eyes landed on a plate of fruit sitting on a nearby table. His ears perked up. Food. He wriggled out of the cloak. Cang Yuchen looked down. The panda stretched his tiny paws toward the table. You're hungry. The panda stared at the fruit. Very. Cang Yuchen picked him up and placed him on the table. The panda immediately waddled toward the fruit. He grabbed a piece with both paws. Then he began eating. Cang Yuchen watched silently. The tiny panda seemed completely unconcerned about his surroundings now. A moment ago, he had been terrified. Now he was eating expensive fruit like he owned the entire residence. Cang Yuchen almost smiled. Almost. A servant returned with more food. Should we prepare a room for the animal? The panda's ears twitched. Animal? He turned around indignantly. I'm not an animal. The servant looked confused. Cang Yuchen glanced at the panda. Then he said calmly, prepare a room. The panda stopped eating. His round eyes brightened. A room? For me? He looked around the enormous residence. Then at Cang Yuchen. Maybe being captured by the villain isn't so bad. Cang Yuchen heard the thought again. This time, he was certain. His gaze slowly sharpened. The panda continued eating without noticing. I should probably stay here for a while. There is food. It's warm. And nobody is chasing me. The panda yawned. I'll think about escaping tomorrow. He curled himself into a ball right there on the table. Cang Yuchen stared at him. You intend to sleep here? The panda's eyes were already closing. 5 more minutes. Cang Yuchen sighed. He picked up the tiny panda and carried him toward his own study. The servants watched in stunned silence. Their terrifying duke had just carried a sleeping panda into his private study. Nobody understood what was happening, but nobody dared question it. Inside the study, Cang Yuchen placed the panda beside his desk. The panda immediately curled up on a soft cushion. Cang Yuchen returned to his documents. For the first time in years, his study was no longer completely silent. There was the faint sound of tiny paws moving against the cushion. Then, silence. Cang Yuchen glanced over. The panda was asleep, completely relaxed, as though he had already decided this was his home. Cang Yuchen looked back at his documents. He didn't know it yet, but the little panda who had accidentally entered his life would soon become the only creature in the entire world he trusted. Part 3. The panda beside the villain's desk. The next morning, Cang Yuchen's study was unusually quiet. Sunlight entered through the tall windows and fell across the enormous wooden desk. Cang Yuchen sat behind it, reading through a stack of documents. His expression was as cold as ever. Nothing had changed. except for the tiny panda sleeping beside his desk. The little creature was curled into a round ball on the cushion. One ear was pressed against the floor. His tiny paws were tucked beneath his chin. Cang Yuchen glanced at him, then returned to his documents. A few moments later, the panda's nose twitched. His eyes opened. He looked around. Then his stomach growled. The sound was surprisingly loud in the silent study. Cang Yuchen slowly raised his eyes. The panda looked at him. Cang Yuchen looked back. The panda stared at him for 3 seconds. Then he slowly turned his head toward the door. Food. Cang Yuchen almost sighed. He called a servant. Bring breakfast. The servant immediately bowed. Yes, my lord. The panda's eyes brightened. This place really is wonderful. Cang Yuchen's hand stopped above the document. He looked at the panda. The panda was already looking toward the door. His mouth hadn't moved. Again, that strange voice. Cang Yuchen didn't say anything. A few minutes later, food arrived. The panda happily ate. After breakfast, he returned to his cushion and fell asleep. This became a routine. Every morning, Cang Yuchen worked. The panda slept. When the panda woke up, he ate. Then he watched Cang Yuchen work. Sometimes he climbed onto the edge of the desk. Sometimes he fell asleep beside the inkstone. Sometimes he simply sat there staring at Cang Yuchen as if judging every decision he made. Cang Yuchen never chased him away. The servants slowly became accustomed to the strange sight. The terrifying Duke of the Northern Realm and his tiny panda. Together. One afternoon, an important guest arrived. A man entered the study and bowed deeply. My lord, I have brought the reports you requested. The panda, who had been chewing on a piece of bamboo, suddenly stopped. His ears stood straight up. He stared at the man. Wait. The panda's expression changed. This is bad. Cang Yuchen's eyes moved toward him. The visitor continued speaking. The Eastern merchants have refused your proposal. The panda's eyes narrowed. That's not true. He's lying. The panda suddenly remembered the novel. He knew this scene. It had happened early in the story. The man standing before Cang Yuchen was supposed to secretly work with the people who would eventually frame him. The panda dropped his bamboo. If the villain believes him, he's going to lose the northern trade route. Cang Yuchen's gaze became colder. The visitor continued. My lord, I believe we should. Stop. The man immediately fell silent. Cang Yuchen placed the document on the table. Who told you the Eastern merchants refused? The man's expression changed. They informed me themselves. Cang Yuchen leaned back. Interesting. The panda stared at him. Oh, he noticed. The man began sweating. Cang Yuchen ordered his guards to investigate the matter. The visitor was escorted away. The study became quiet again. The panda picked up his bamboo. He took one bite, then another. Cang Yuchen watched him. You knew? The panda froze. His little black eyes slowly lifted. Cang Yuchen's voice remained calm. You knew he was lying. The panda blinked, then looked away. No idea what you're talking about. Cang Yuchen narrowed his eyes. The panda continued chewing. I'm just a harmless panda. A pause. An extremely hungry harmless panda. For the first time, Cang Yuchen felt certain. This creature was not ordinary. He didn't know what the panda was hiding. He didn't know where it had come from. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The little panda seemed to know things that no one else could know. And somehow, every time the panda reacted strangely, trouble followed. Cang Yuchen returned to his documents. The panda climbed back onto his cushion. Neither of them spoke. But from that day onward, Cang Yuchen began paying much closer attention to the little creature beside his desk. And the panda? He was already planning his next nap. The days passed quietly. To everyone in the Northern Realm, Cang Yuchen was still the terrifying duke who rarely showed emotion and trusted almost no one. But inside his study, things were very different. The tiny panda had made his own rules. Sometimes he slept beside the desk. Sometimes he climbed onto Cang Yuchen's chair. And whenever the duke was reading important documents, the panda would place both paws on the papers and stare at him seriously, as if he were another official. Cang Yuchen had stopped asking why, but the panda had another habit. Whenever someone entered the study, he watched them carefully. One afternoon, a servant entered carrying tea. The panda lifted his head. His little nose twitched. Then his eyes widened. Wait, that tea. He remembered the novel. This was the day someone was supposed to put something harmful into Cang Yuchen's tea. It wouldn't defeat him immediately, but it would make him seriously ill. The panda jumped onto the desk. The servant nearly dropped the tray. Cang Yuchen looked at him. The panda stared at the tea, then at Cang Yuchen. Don't drink it. The servant placed the cup before the duke. My lord. The panda pushed the cup away with one tiny paw. Silence filled the room. Cang Yuchen looked at the panda. Then he looked at the tea. He picked up the cup. The panda's heart nearly stopped. No. Cang Yuchen paused. For a moment, he studied the panda's frightened expression. Then he slowly placed the cup down. Take it away. The servant froze. My lord. Now. The servant hurried from the room. Cang Yuchen turned toward the panda. How did you know? The panda immediately looked away. Know what? You reacted before anyone else. The panda began licking his paw. I'm just very smart. Cang Yuchen raised an eyebrow. Very smart. That evening, he secretly ordered an investigation. The result came quickly. There really had been something wrong with the tea. Cang Yuchen sat silently. The panda was sleeping beside him. For years, people had approached the duke with hidden intentions. Yet this tiny creature had warned him without asking for anything. What are you? Cang Yuchen murmured. The panda shifted in his sleep. Then, in his thoughts, came one sleepy word. Bamboo. Cang Yuchen stared. A moment later, another thought followed. Sweet rice cake. For the first time, the duke's cold expression almost broke. The next morning, the panda woke to a wonderful smell. Beside his cushion was fresh bamboo and a plate of sweet rice cakes. His eyes became enormous. For me? He looked toward Cang Yuchen. The duke sat behind his desk, pretending to read. The panda immediately rushed toward the food. From that morning onward, his meals became better, his cushion became softer, and whenever Cang Yuchen left the residence, the panda went with him. Neither of them realized it yet, but their strange little arrangement was becoming something neither wanted to lose. After that day, something quietly changed. The little panda was no longer simply a creature living in Cang Yuchen's residence. He had become part of the duke's daily routine. Whenever Cang Yuchen went to his study, the panda followed. Whenever he walked through the garden, the panda followed. And whenever he had to leave the residence, the panda somehow managed to go with him. One morning, Cang Yuchen prepared to leave for the northern market. The panda was sleeping peacefully on his cushion. Cang Yuchen put on his outer robe and walked toward the door. The panda didn't move. He reached the doorway. Still nothing. Then one tiny eye opened. The panda looked at the empty room. Then at Cang Yuchen. Wait. He's leaving. The panda immediately jumped up and ran after him. His tiny paws hurried across the floor. Cang Yuchen stopped. The panda reached his feet and looked up. Take me. You were sleeping. The panda blinked. I can sleep in the carriage. Cang Yuchen was silent. Then he bent down and picked him up. The panda happily settled against him. Good. I have secured transportation. Cang Yuchen's lips almost curved upward. You are becoming troublesome. The panda closed his eyes proudly. I'm adorable. Cang Yuchen paused. You are certainly shameless. Soon, the carriage arrived at the northern market. The streets were crowded with merchants, travelers, and spiritual beasts. The panda's eyes sparkled. Then his nose twitched. Sweet buns. He turned toward Cang Yuchen. The duke looked down at him. The panda stared. No words were necessary. Cang Yuchen sighed. Fine. A servant soon returned with several boxes of sweets. The panda looked delighted. This man is not bad. He might actually be the best villain in history. Cang Yuchen quietly heard the thought, but said nothing. Instead, he handed the panda a small piece. The panda happily ate it. But when they reached the market square, the cheerful mood changed. A group of men approached. Their leader bowed. My lord, we have urgent information. The panda stopped chewing. Something about the man felt familiar. Then the memory returned. Wait, this is from the original plot. His eyes widened. They're going to accuse Cang Yuchen of stealing spiritual treasures. The man began speaking. Several spiritual treasures have disappeared from the royal treasury. He paused. And the evidence points toward your people. The crowd became silent. The panda remembered what happened in the novel. Cang Yuchen was supposed to lose his temper. His enemies would then use his reaction against him. No. The panda quickly climbed onto Cang Yuchen's shoulder and placed one tiny paw against his cheek. Don't get angry. They're waiting for you to react. Cang Yuchen looked at him. Then he turned toward the accusing man. Show me the evidence. The market square had become completely silent. Cang Yuchen stood calmly in the middle of the crowd with the tiny panda sitting on his shoulder. The man who had accused him looked confident. My lord, the evidence was found among the belongings of one of your guards. Cang Yuchen's expression remained cold. Bring him here. A frightened young guard was quickly brought before them. The accusing man smiled. You see? Everything points toward the Duke. The panda's ears twitched. He stared at the evidence. Then his eyes widened. That's not right. He remembered the original story. They planted the evidence on that guard. If Cang Yuchen followed the original plot, he would be blamed for everything. The panda nervously looked at him. Please don't do anything stupid. Cang Yuchen glanced at the panda. Then he calmly said, search the man's room again. The accusing man's smile disappeared. The panda's mouth fell open. Wait, that's exactly what I was thinking. Cang Yuchen turned toward the guards. Search every room belonging to the people involved in this accusation. The panda stared at him. No way. Did he just listen to me? The investigation continued. Eventually, more suspicious evidence was discovered. The accusation began falling apart. The panda couldn't stop staring at Cang Yuchen. For the first time, the villain wasn't following the original story. Later, inside the carriage, the panda sat opposite him. He stared. Cang Yuchen stared back. The panda tilted his head. Cang Yuchen slightly tilted his head too. The panda raised one paw. Cang Yuchen raised an eyebrow. The panda pointed at himself. Then at Cang Yuchen. Can you hear me? Cang Yuchen said nothing. The panda waited. Nothing happened. He sighed. I knew it. I'm imagining things. Then Cang Yuchen suddenly spoke. You're very noisy. The panda froze. Slowly, he turned around. He can hear me. Yes. The panda nearly fell over. You can hear me. Yes. Since when? Since the first night. The panda covered his face with both paws. Oh no. He heard everything. Everything. Cang Yuchen confirmed. The panda lowered his paws. Then you heard me call you the villain? Yes. And I said you were going to die? Yes. And I said you're terrible at making decisions? Cang Yuchen paused. Yes. The panda became silent. Then he sat up seriously. Fine. We need to negotiate. Cang Yuchen looked amused. Negotiate? The panda nodded. You take me wherever you go. He waited. And I warn you whenever something dangerous is going to happen. The panda pointed toward the basket of food. In return, you give me the best food available. Cang Yuchen stared at him. You are asking for payment? The panda nodded proudly. Of course. Saving your life isn't free. For several seconds, Cang Yuchen said nothing. Then he laughed quietly. The terrifying Duke had actually laughed. He reached down and lifted the panda into his arms. Deal. The panda's ears perked up. Really? Really? Excellent. I knew being your panda would be profitable. Cang Yuchen looked down at him. One condition. The panda looked up. You are not allowed to leave my side without telling me. The panda blinked. Then happily nodded. Deal. Neither of them knew how much that little agreement would change the future. The panda thought he was simply saving the villain from his bad ending. But Cang Yuchen was beginning to realize something else. He didn't want the panda beside him only because it knew the future. He wanted him there, because his once lonely study no longer felt empty. The journey back to the northern residence was unusually peaceful. The tiny panda sat comfortably in Cang Yuchen's arms. For the first time since arriving in this strange world, he didn't need to hide his thoughts. After all, they had a contract. Food in exchange for saving the villain. A very reasonable agreement. The panda yawned. I think I'm going to need a raise. Cang Yuchen looked down. A raise. The panda froze. I didn't say anything. You did. The panda quickly covered his mouth with both paws. Cang Yuchen's lips curved slightly. You really are shameless. The panda turned away. At least I'm cute. Cang Yuchen didn't argue. After they returned home, their strange arrangement quickly became normal. The panda slept beside Cang Yuchen's study table. He ate whenever he wanted. And whenever someone entered the study, he listened carefully. Sometimes he warned Cang Yuchen about danger. Other times, he simply slept through the entire meeting. One evening, Cang Yuchen was reading an old spiritual record when the panda climbed onto the desk. His eyes landed on the ancient drawings. A golden flower, a white spiritual root, and a strange formation surrounding them. The panda's eyes widened. Wait, he remembered this. It was a rare spiritual treasure called the moonheart root. According to the novel, it could greatly increase the cultivation of a spiritual beast. And if the beast had enough cultivation, it might even transform into human form. Cang Yuchen noticed his expression. You know it. The panda nodded. Cang Yuchen closed the book. Tell me. It's a very powerful spiritual treasure. If a spiritual beast finds it, their cultivation can increase greatly. Cang Yuchen looked at him. And what happens if you consume it? The panda slowly pointed toward himself. Maybe I could become stronger. Then another thought appeared. Maybe I could even become human. Cang Yuchen's eyes narrowed. Human? The panda nodded. But I'm not sure. He looked down. Honestly, I'm pretty comfortable being a panda. I get free food. I have a soft bed. I can sleep beside your desk. And I get carried everywhere. Cang Yuchen almost laughed. You have no ambition. The panda immediately became offended. I have ambition. A short pause followed. My ambition is to eat good food and sleep peacefully. Cang Yuchen shook his head. But the next morning, he secretly ordered his people to search for the moon heart root. The panda knew nothing. Days passed. He continued eating, sleeping, and warning Cang Yuchen whenever danger appeared. Meanwhile, every trap prepared by the Duke's enemies failed. Nobody understood why. But Cang Yuchen knew. His tiny guardian always saw danger before it arrived. One night, Cang Yuchen returned later than usual. The panda was waiting beside the study table. He had refused to sleep. You're late. Cang Yuchen stopped. You waited? The panda quickly looked away. I was just hungry. Cang Yuchen glanced at the untouched food beside him. You didn't eat. The panda became quiet. Cang Yuchen walked over and gently picked him up. The panda rested against his chest. Then Cang Yuchen said quietly, I found something. The panda lifted his head. Cang Yuchen opened his palm. A tiny golden seed glowed with faint spiritual light. The panda's eyes became enormous. Is that the moon heart root? The panda stared. But this is incredibly expensive. Cang Yuchen calmly replied. I bought it. How much? Cang Yuchen told him. The panda nearly fainted. That's more money than an ordinary family could spend in years. Cang Yuchen simply looked at him. You needed it. The panda stared at the golden seed. Then he looked at Cang Yuchen. For once, he wasn't thinking about food. He wasn't thinking about the novel. He wasn't even thinking about changing the future. He was only thinking one thing. Why does this villain care about me so much? Cang Yuchen lowered his eyes. Don't overthink it. The panda gently held the spiritual treasure. Neither of them knew the truth. The moon heart root was not an ordinary spiritual treasure. And when the panda finally consumed it, something impossible was about to happen. The tiny panda stared at the golden spiritual root in Cang Yuchen's hand. A faint golden light surrounded it, while tiny spiritual symbols moved across its surface like stars. So this is the thing that can change my fate. Cang Yuchen held it closer. You don't have to use it. The panda looked up. What? If you are comfortable as you are, there is no need to change. The panda became quiet. Nobody had ever asked what he wanted. In his previous life, he had been an ordinary person. Then he had died while reading a novel and somehow awakened inside it as a newborn panda. Since then, survival had been his only concern. But now, he had a home, food, someone who protected him, and someone who actually listened. The panda gently touched the spiritual root. I want to try? Cang Yuchen nodded. Then eat. The panda sniffed it twice. It smells sweet. Cang Yuchen raised an eyebrow. You expected it to taste terrible? I did. The panda hesitated before taking one bite. The spiritual root instantly dissolved. Golden light exploded from his body. Cang Yuchen stood immediately. Panda. Spiritual energy rushed through the room. The windows rattled, candles went out, and ancient symbols appeared across the floor. The panda floated into the air. Wait, this wasn't supposed to happen this fast. Stay calm. I'm trying. The golden light grew brighter. His tiny paws became human hands. His round ears disappeared. His short legs stretched, while his black and white fur dissolved into streams of spiritual light. Cang Yuchen stood completely still. He had witnessed countless spiritual transformations, but never anything like this. Finally, the light faded. A young man stood in the center of the formation. Long white hair fell down his back. His eyes were deep black, and his pale face carried an expression of complete confusion. He stared at his hands, then his feet, then Cang Yuchen. His voice startled him. He touched his throat. Can talk. Cang Yuchen's gray eyes remained fixed on him. The young man suddenly looked down. His eyes widened. Where is my fur? Cang Yuchen finally looked away. The young man quickly covered himself. This is a disaster. I wasn't prepared for becoming human. Cang Yuchen took off his outer robe and placed it around his shoulders. Wait here. The young man wrapped himself in it. Thank you. Cang Yuchen paused. That voice was the same voice he had heard inside his mind for months. Then the young man noticed a plate of sweet rice cakes. His eyes immediately brightened. Cang Yuchen noticed. You haven't changed. What? He pointed toward the food. The young man smiled. I'm still hungry. For the first time in years, Cang Yuchen laughed. The young man stared in surprise. The feared villain wasn't smiling because he had won or defeated an enemy. He was smiling because the little panda who had changed his life was finally standing before him. The original story had said Cang Yuchen would die alone. But that story had already changed. The young man picked up a rice cake and took a bite. His eyes sparkled. Yuchen, I think becoming human was a very good decision. Cang Yuchen shook his head. You're still only thinking about food. Of course. Beneath the quiet moonlight, the villain who was supposed to die alone and the little panda who was never supposed to matter had begun a completely new story together. The young man sat on the edge of Cang Yuchen's bed, still wrapped in the large black robe. He kept staring at his hands, then his feet, then his long white hair. Everything felt strange. He touched his cheek and looked toward the bronze mirror. A beautiful young man stared back. White hair, black eyes, soft features, a confused expression. Is that really me? Cang Yuchen stood near the window. Yes. The young man touched his hair. I look. He paused. Different. You are different. The young man turned toward him. What should I do now? Cang Yuchen was silent for a moment. First, you need a name. A name? You cannot continue being called Panda. The young man looked offended. Why not? Panda is a perfectly good name. Cang Yuchen raised an eyebrow. The young man immediately looked away. No. Cang Yuchen walked to the table and thought for a moment. Yin Tuan. The young man blinked. Yin Tuan. Yes. Your hair is soft like a cloud. The young man's eyes brightened. Yin Tuan. He smiled. I like it. Then his smile became wider. Can I call myself Tuan Tuan? Cang Yuchen looked at him. That is your name. Tuan Tuan. The young man smiled happily. That's cute. Cang Yuchen said nothing, but his gaze softened. Suddenly Yin Tuan remembered something. Wait. What? You've been hearing my thoughts this entire time? Yes. Yin Tuan's face turned red. Then, he covered his face. You heard everything I thought about you? Everything. Yin Tuan wanted to disappear. I called him terrifying. I called him a terrible villain. I said he needed someone to manage his life. I even complained about his food. He peeked between his fingers. Cang Yuchen remained completely calm. Fortunately, you think about food more than anything else. That's not true. Cang Yuchen glanced toward the rice cakes. Yin Tuan followed his gaze. He immediately grabbed another one. Maybe it is. Later, Yin Tuan tried walking. His legs felt unfamiliar. One step, then another. Then, he stumbled. Cang Yuchen caught him. Careful. Thank you. Yin Tuan tried again. 3 steps. Then 5. I can walk. He turned too quickly, caught his foot in the robe, and stumbled again. Cang Yuchen caught him. Yin Tuan looked embarrassed. Don't laugh. I wasn't. You were thinking about laughing. Cang Yuchen looked away. You definitely were. Then Cang Yuchen said, Come. Where? You need proper clothes. Yin Tuan looked down at the oversized robe. Okay. They left the room together. After a few steps, Yin Tuan suddenly stopped. Cang Yuchen. The man turned. Yin Tuan smiled. Thank you. For what? For bringing me home. Cang Yuchen didn't answer immediately. Then he said, You saved my life first. Yin Tuan smiled. Then I suppose we're even. Cang Yuchen looked at him. No. Yin Tuan tilted his head. We're not. Before Yin Tuan could ask what he meant, Cang Yuchen continued walking. Yin Tuan hurried after him. He didn't notice the faint smile on Cang Yuchen's face. Neither of them knew their peaceful days were about to end. Somewhere in the northern realm, someone had discovered that the mysterious panda who always stayed beside Cang Yuchen was no longer a panda, and they wanted to know exactly what Yin Tuan had become. The villains happily ever after. The northern residents had never been this lively. It had been several weeks since Yin Tuan became human. He was still learning how to live with his new body. Walking was no longer difficult. Speaking was easy. Using spiritual energy was getting better. But there was one problem. He still behaved exactly like a panda. Every morning, Yin Tuan would wake up late. Every morning, Cang Yuchen would already be sitting at his desk. And every morning, Yin Tuan would appear beside him with messy white hair and a sleepy expression. Yuchen. Cang Yuchen looked up from his documents. You are late. I was sleeping. I know. I was having a very important dream. What kind of dream? Yintuan thought seriously. There was a mountain of bamboo. Cang Yuchen returned to his documents. You haven't changed. Yintuan smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. Their days continued like that. The once feared duke now had someone who casually walked into his study without knocking. Someone who stole food from his plate. Someone who fell asleep while sitting beside him. And someone who had completely destroyed the terrifying reputation of his private residence. One afternoon, Cang Yuchen was preparing to leave. Yintuan immediately followed him. Where are you going? The royal palace. I'm coming. No. Yintuan stopped. Why? It is a political meeting. I know. You will be bored. I can sleep. Cang Yuchen stared at him. Yintuan smiled innocently. I'll be very quiet. You said that last time. I was quiet. You stole the emperor's pastries. Yintuan looked offended. They were sitting there. They belonged to the emperor. Then the emperor should have guarded them better. Cang Yuchen stared at him for several seconds. Then he turned toward the carriage. Come. Yintuan immediately followed. See? You can't live without me. Cang Yuchen paused. Don't become too confident. But there was a faint smile in his eyes. The journey to the palace was peaceful. Yintuan sat beside him, looking out the window. After a while, he quietly rested his head against Cang Yuchen's shoulder. Cang Yuchen looked down. Comfortable. Very. Then stay. Yintuan smiled. I was planning to. For a while, neither spoke. The world outside the carriage passed quietly. The novel had once described Cang Yuchen as a man destined to die alone. But the future written in that book no longer existed. The original male lead had lost his carefully planned advantage. The people who had framed Cang Yuchen had been exposed. The villain had kept his position. His enemies had disappeared from his life. And most importantly, he was no longer alone. That evening, after returning home, Yintuan stood beneath the moonlight in the garden. His long white hair moved gently in the wind. Cang Yuchen approached him. You seem quiet. Yintuan smiled. I was thinking. About what? About my old life. Cang Yuchen became silent. Yintuan looked toward the moon. I never expected to wake up in this world. He smiled softly. If someone had told me that I would die while reading a novel and wake up as a tiny panda, I would have laughed at them. Cang Yuchen looked at him. And now? Yintuan turned toward him. Now I think. He smiled. Maybe I was lucky. Cang Yuchen stepped closer. Why? Because I found you. The words were simple, but Cang Yuchen's expression changed. Yintuan suddenly became shy. He looked away. Yintuan. Cang Yuchen reached out and gently moved a strand of white hair away from his face. I don't care about the story anymore. Yintuan looked at him. What? I don't care what the novel said would happen. Cang Yuchen's gray eyes softened. I only care about what happens now. Yintuan's heart began beating faster. He smiled. Then, he took a small step closer. Can I stay beside you? Cang Yuchen answered without hesitation. You never had to ask. Yintuan laughed softly. Good. He suddenly remembered something. Wait. Cang Yuchen raised an eyebrow. What? I have one condition. Cang Yuchen sighed. What is it this time? Yintuan smiled mischievously. Unlimited desserts. Absolutely not. Then I'm leaving. You won't. I will. You don't even know where the gate is. Yintuan froze. That's true. Cang Yuchen finally laughed. Yintuan looked at him in surprise. You laughed. I did. You should do it more. Cang Yuchen's smile slowly faded into something gentler. Only if you stay. Yintuan's expression softened. I'll stay. The garden became quiet. Cang Yuchen leaned closer. Yintuan looked at him for a moment before closing his eyes. Their lips met in a brief, gentle kiss beneath the moonlight. When they separated, Yintuan's cheeks were warm. He immediately looked away. Cang Yuchen asked quietly, Are you embarrassed? No. You are. I'm not. Your ears are red. Yintuan covered them. That's because I'm still part panda. Cang Yuchen smiled. Of course. Yintuan glared at him. Don't laugh. I wasn't. You definitely were. They stood together beneath the moon. One was the villain who had once been destined for a tragic ending. The other was a tiny panda who had never been important enough to have a proper place in the original story. But the story had changed. The villain survived. The panda found a home. And the two people who were never supposed to meet found each other. Yintuan looked up at the night sky. Yuchen. I think our story is better than the original. Cang Yuchen looked at him. Much better. And somewhere in the ancient spirit realm, beneath the same moon that had witnessed their first meeting, their new story finally began. The end. Panda Face Crescent Moon Red Heart. And that's where we end today's chapter. Panda Face sparkles. Was Yun Tuan becoming human a good idea? Subscribe, please, for more.